Hey everyone, this is Gabby,
and Karim.
and you're listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Halad to Health.
Tune in each week to hear us talk about the journey of getting into med school.
From GAMSAT to medical interviews, get the insider scoop from med students who have done it all before. So stay tuned and get ready to get med ready.
Hi guys, welcome back to the MMI mini-series. Before we get started, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I am recording today. For me personally, that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. For today, the type of station that we have is a personal character station. In terms of difficulty, it's sort of medium. There's 1 minute reading time, 1 minute per question. The student today is Abby, the tutor or examiner is Eleanor, and the station is as follows. Discuss a time when you have had to help a friend in need.
So the most recent account of when I had to help my friend was when my close friend in high school contacted me for the first time in a very long time to actually help her with relationship advice. And that was because her partner at that time was a person in her own course. So she couldn't really talk to her course friends about it because they were all linked in the same friendship group. So when she drove to my house and when she was quite emotional, I was quite taken aback because normally she's quite a, quite a stern and a bit of regal individual. She doesn't show her emotions very much. So I tried to really listen to her first and foremost and get her to talk about her stories with appropriate questions. And, it wasn't good news, but I tried to just really navigate through her feelings, what she's doing. And one thing that I really tried to do was to not make decisions on behalf of her. I really tried to prompt her to think about what decisions she would make depending on her own values. And I was happy when in the end she was happy with the decisions that she made. So that was my most recent account of when I helped my friend.
And what were some of the challenges you faced and how do you think you overcame them?
Yeah. So first thing was that because the situation had happened there prior to her seeking advice, it was really raw and every details were kind of, convoluted in her head. So the main challenge was to get her thinking straight about her own situation. I didn't want to, and that's how I kind of broke down the events for her. So as she was talking, I said, okay, so you've told me this, you told me that, you told me this, and you might take this option, but you might also take this option. And so I tried to guide her, and that's how I overcame that challenge of detangling everything and making so she has the, current events all straight on her head so she can make the right decision for her next step in the relationship.
And what do you think you learned from that situation?
Yeah. I think the greatest thing that I learned was I hadn't contacted her in a long time. And I think one of my flaws is that I don't really keep up in touch with my friends. I just wait for them to come to me. And so when I saw my friend who I was really close with in such a difficult time, I regretted not contacting her first and asking her, how are you going? How's your relationship been? How's things going with you? Because that, I reckon, would have helped her a lot and it would have made it easier for her to tell me that difficulty in the first place without having her approach me first by driving to my house. So I think the biggest thing I learned is to actually keep in contact with friends, to reach out to them first and just see how they're going once in a while.
And how do you show empathy in everyday life?
Mm-hmm. I think the greatest or the best way to show empathy is firstly by listening intensely. In order to engage with other people's emotions, you need that communication. And I think rather than talking, I think you should listen because that gets the people to talk about their own emotions, their own feelings, and makes it easier for you to immerse themselves in their experience as well. I think the second most important thing is to think about how it relates to your own situation. So even when I'm talking to my mom or my dad about everyday difficulties that they have, even if they're older than me, I try to think about a time when it had something similar happen to me. And that makes it easier for me to engage in their emotions. And to show that I am empathetic, I try to stay silent, use appropriate gestures, and really think about my words before I say them.
And what is the importance of displaying empathy as a doctor?
Mhm. I think often when patients come to doctors, they're in quite distressful situations. And they're often in really hard situations that wouldn't have happened to the doctor themselves, hopefully. And I think in that situation, because the patient is scared, they might be concerned or worried, the doctor needs to gauge their emotions appropriately. And they need to think about, okay, what's the best thing that I can say to this person? Or what's the best thing not to say to this person, which is just as important as what to say. And to do that, you need empathy, because you need to know, engage, and feel their emotions as you are, to really help them appropriately and be sensitive and tactful when approaching difficult circumstances and emotions. So I think that's why doctors need to have empathy.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think that's it.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So how do you think you went for that station?
Yeah. So I think I was quite taken aback when I saw that question, because I hadn't thought about the friend question.
Yeah.
I think I just tried to think about the most recent time. So that was the most recent one before lockdown started. So I just went with that one. So I think, didn't stagger too much. So I think that's one thing that I liked. Perhaps I would have liked a bit more specificity, maybe. But obviously, because it's like a relationship thing, I didn't want to reveal too much anyway. So I think I try to find that balance.
Yeah. Okay. So really well done. I think that you handled that station very eloquently. You were clear. You didn't hesitate too much or ramble too much. I think that you did that really well. So I'm going to start with giving kind of an overview of, what they're after within this question and why they might be asking it. So I think having examples for something like this is something that's really useful and really key. It's quite a common or a pertinent question that they can and might ask in the interviews. And I think having a few examples under your tool belt as a way of how you demonstrate empathy, which is at the crux of this question, is really important. So I think you did well at going on the fly there. I think that a lot of have you heard of the STAR technique before?
No.
No, okay. So I think that sometimes you tended to focus a lot on action-based responses. I liked that because it showed that you were proactive and that you had a plethora of tools in your toolkit to be able to deal with lots of different circumstances. But I think that to incorporate, so that's the A of STAR, but to incorporate a little bit more structure, you can first go into situation, task, action, and then reflection, and try to spread your response across those 4 areas a little bit more. So in terms of that, bringing in more of the reflection, what you learned from that, what it told you about yourself, your friend, the human condition, something like that. So that can be a really good way to frame your ideas, especially if you're thinking of something new or that you haven't tried out before, if you haven't practiced before. That's really good to bring in. I think you did well in terms of setting the scene. You described your friend's emotional state really well and how you responded to that. when you're talking about your challenges you faced and how you overcame them, I think that's what I was getting at a little bit with the action-based response and incorporating more of a reflection there. What you've learned from the situation, I think you did really well in terms of that, and how the situation taught you something in the moment. I think even there's a room in that question to expand beyond the specificity of your example and talk about how you're working on this now, or how you might work on it in the future, and what you have implemented after the fact. That can just add a little bit more complexity. How do you show empathy in everyday life? I think this one was good in terms of your action-based, like you described a lot of areas where you can and show empathy and how you do that. I think you do have the opportunity to relate that back to your scenario as well, even in a broader question like that, so that it's easy to follow. But well done on that one. I think that it was well structured. What is the importance of displaying empathy as a doctor? I think that this one you seemed a little bit more stumped on. I think that I could tell that you started to lose your structure a little bit. You were just like, this is minor. This was so minor, but a tiny bit of a ramble there. But definitely good show of empathy in that circumstance. You definitely described the patient condition and emotional state really well and really eloquently, and I think that demonstrated actively how you can bring empathy to your role. I think that discussion of implementation and response and reaction and reflection is also an important thing to bring in the fourth question there. Overall, really well done. I think that you were expressive. It was easy to communicate with you. It seemed not rehearsed. You were engaging. Would you like to ask any questions at all?
I think all good. Yep. So just with the last question, actually.
Yes.
The importance of practicing empathy as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you have any suggestions on how to kind of frame that response?
In terms of structure, or in terms of how I might respond? Like
structure wise.
Yeah, I think that it's good to ask yourself, you can't really use the STAR response there, but it's good to ask yourself 3 questions. So who that might affect, what that might look like, and then why, and why is it important. So that's quite often, if I can't use the STAR response, what I'll go to in terms of interview practice is just asking yourself those 3 things, making sure you get around to them. Who are the stakeholders, and then what you would do. Why is it important?
Thank you for listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Allied to Health. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word about our podcast. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So send us an email or message on Facebook. All of our links are in the show notes. Thanks. We'll see you next time.